Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you sports information from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of NBA, Milwaukee Bucks finally managed to beat Atlanta Hawks 113-102 in Game 3 of the conference finals. Now it's 2-1. And yes, from the world of Formula One, Max Verstappen won the Styrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring on Sunday. And yes, from the world of tennis, Top Gun Djokovic chases another milestone at Wimbledon that starts from Monday. And yes, from the world of Euro 2020, Belgium beat defending champion Portugal 1-0, while the Czechs stunned the Dutch 2-0 to book a quarter-final berth. And yes, those were the headlines, everybody. And yes, we were talking about the world of NBA and how these conferences finals are underway. An interesting take with regards to how Milwaukee Bucks managed to win against the Atlanta Hawks 113-102. Not to forget that Atlanta Hawks was surely on a lead, but there came a point and Trae Young was phenomenal. But in the third quarter, he manages to, had an ankle injury and he was out. But anyways, to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have our NBA expert Abbas with us. Abbas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alamdar.
Great. Abbas, what an interesting match to begin with. Obviously, Milwaukee Bucks managed to win against the Hawks. Trae Young was phenomenal. The Hawks were leading 56-46 with 2 minutes 39 seconds left before the intermission, and instantaneously after Trae Young, gets that injury in the third quarter, things change ultimately for the Bucks. What's your take on this interesting match? Because now they lead 2-1 against the Hawks.
Yes, this was a big game, and now we are at high in the hierarchy as we can get. So this is the Eastern Conference Finals, and we have the two best teams in the Eastern Conference fighting for the conference title. Right. And there is Bucks, and then there's the Atlanta Hawks. Right. And the Hawks have played brilliantly throughout the postseason, especially behind their superstar point guard in Ice Trae Young, and he's been spectacular the whole series. It's just been really unfortunate for the Hawks that he got injured, because the way we see it, the Atlanta Hawks were leading 95-88 with 7.5 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. And then the Milwaukee Bucks went on to a 25-7 run behind Giannis and Chris Middleton. Right. And, they were able to take the game away from the Atlanta Hawks.
Right. And if we look back into the situation, I think there still was a lot of pressure. I'll surely go into the previous game as well. But not to forget that, in the last quarter, Atlanta Hawks only managed to score 17 points. However, Milwaukee Bucks managed to get 30 points, which obviously gave them a very substantial lead of 11 points, obviously making them win 113-102.
Yes, the Bucks have played great basketball throughout the season. They've also played good basketball in the previous seasons. Right. But the difference in particular this time around is that the role players and the players apart from Giannis are stepping up big time. Right. And, even in the last series against the Brooklyn Nets, it was all because Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton stepped up. Right. Lopez is playing great. We all know Giannis is an MVP status player, and he's playing the way he should. But when he has other players pitching in with him, that is just tremendous for the Bucks, and it gives other teams nightmares. It was pretty unfortunate for the Atlanta Hawks the way they lost the last game, because it was a total blowout. Right. And it was very difficult. It will be very difficult for them to shake it off, because it's a really young team, and when you're that young, it's difficult to shake off that big loss and move forward. Right. And if we look back on how the Hawks managed to get where they are, if we look back into how they managed to, take the 76ers off the grid and, make their space, because a lot of people have a lot of hopes in terms of Hawks. But now I think Milwaukee Bucks is getting there. And not only this, if I want to talk about, if we jump into the previous game, that was one of the most interesting games that I've seen so far, when Milwaukee Bucks managed to score 125-91, ensuring that, they tie up the lead in the conference finals. And I think, now the direction that they're heading, if we talk about Giannis, obviously he's one of the major phenomenal players. With regards to that, obviously Drew Holiday
So how do you think, because I think these injuries that are slowly and gradually coming into the teams are surely affecting their performance, and I think this is not the right time for the injuries to come up, because these teams have come a long, long way.
Yes, I think it wouldn't be wrong if I say that this postseason is plagued by injuries, and this goes for all the teams that are present over there.
Right.
No matter if it's the Eastern Conference or the West, the results are just different due to many, many injuries. We knew Kyrie Irving went down,
Right.
James Harden was injured, and then Kawhi is injured, Anthony Davis is injured.
Right.
And, so all the big names have received some form of injury, which has affected the outcomes. But the Atlanta Hawks have played brilliantly. As I mentioned before, behind Trae Young, they have Danilo Gallinari, and then they have Bogdanovic, and they have a really good young group which is fighting, and they are playing really good basketball. They have the three-point shot. They can play inside. They can play outside. They have a good point guard who knows how to set everyone up, who knows who can score whenever he wants to as well. So this is a really, really bright future for the Atlanta Hawks. And even though me including, everyone is counting them out in this series,
Right.
the series is still not over.
Right.
It's still 2-1, and there's a lot of basketball remaining to be played.
Right. And if we talk about upsets, obviously a lot of people, in terms of myself, obviously I had a lot of hopes in terms of Nets. Obviously they're a phenomenal team, but these injuries kind of took them down. Not to forget, the major upset of the world of NBA was obviously the LA Lakers. Obviously LeBron James being the only sole person out there who's trying to keep and bring their team together. Obviously injuries to Anthony Davis and so many players out there. So I think things have developed into a major upset with regards to if they could not manage to get into the conference finals.
Yes, so the two of the things we've talked about this earlier as well, Alamdar. I mentioned that when postseason comes along, the team which can stay healthy the longest has the biggest chance of winning. Because
Right.
deep in the postseason, it all comes down to the health. And it all comes down to the role players as well. Not only your best player or your superstar, how well he performs, how the other players pitch in. Just for example, if you take Chris Middleton, there's a stat for him that when he shoots 40%, in this playoff, in any game above 40%, his team is 9-0. So they have won all 9 games. Then Chris Middleton shoots over 40%, and
Right.
when he shoots under 40%, his team is 1-4. So basically, other players have to step up. They have to keep the injuries to a minimum, however they can. But injuries are just some things which are non-tangibles. You cannot control them.
True.
But it is pretty unfortunate if your superstar goes down with injury and the fan base just goes down with it.
Right. I would also want to talk about another instantaneous perspective with regards to the conference finals. Let's talk about the Clippers and the Suns. Obviously, right now, the Phoenix Suns lead 3-1. The last game that took place, obviously, a very close game, but not a kind of high-scoring game, because LA Clippers ended up scoring 80 points, whereas the Phoenix Suns ended up scoring 84 points.
That was an ugly game, Alamdar, for everyone, be that the Clippers, be that the Suns, be that
Right.
the basketball fans, be that the coaches. Because it was a low-scoring game in the middle, kind of in the third quarter, it seemed like, both teams are going nowhere.
Right.
They're just taking bad quality shots and missing them continuously. It was a low-scoring game. But it is particularly frustrating for the Clippers because the Clippers have lost the last 3 games with a
Right.
total margin of just 11 points.
Right.
Only 11 points for a total of 3 different games. And especially, behind missed free shots from Paul George or, decision-making from DeMarcus Cousins and their coaches. So they would still believe that they could have just gone in and snatched any of these 3 games. But, a 3-1 lead for the Utah Jazz is just, pretty decisive. Almost the series is over, especially when Kawhi is injured. I don't see the Clippers coming back, from a 3-1 deficit. And, all the credit goes to the Phoenix Suns
Right.
behind Chris Paul, and especially their young players. DeAndre Ayton basically proved his worth. And, he was tested twice in the last 2 series, and he cleared those tests with flying colors. And I believe that Chris Paul is possibly the best thing that happened to DeAndre Ayton.
Right. And if we look back into, obviously, the previous game where LA Clippers managed to win against the Suns, it was also a substantial lead, 106-92. So I think right now, Phoenix Sun is literally at the brink of getting to the finals.
Yes. So it will be an amazing series, an amazing run. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. They've played spectacularly behind the leadership of Chris Paul. All of us know how great of a player, how great of a leader, how great of a point guard, and what a vocal person Chris Paul is, especially for the young guys like DeAndre Ayton. It's really good to have someone, a wise voice inside your ears all the time telling you what to do. And, they run, DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul run the pick and roll spectacularly. I mean, I believe they run it above 90%, which is a huge, huge number. And, when they're playing so good, even though how young they are, they rally behind their leader in Chris Paul. They have, a lights-out scorer in Devin Booker. You have to be really, really great if you remind other people of Kobe Bryant. I say it from all my heart. If someone reminds me of Kobe Bryant, that's Devin Booker. And, if I say that, it means I'm holding Devin Booker to a really, really high standard, possibly the highest standard I can ever put myself in. So that's really high praise for, Chris Paul and his crew and the entire team.
Right. I just wanted to share one thing, obviously, your input in it. I think right now, in terms of the performances by the team, we have mostly seen that, the young lot of team is out there, making most of the points, keeping up with the efforts, practicing more, getting there. And obviously talking about the young ones, we talk about Bucks as well. Because I remember discussing about Bucks lately with one of the analysts, and he said that, obviously being a young lot, obviously, but they have Giannis with them. But because of the fact that they've gelled in together, so now it seems more like a game of the youngsters, but they will probably get there maybe somewhere in 2023. And I said, what if, the youngsters have gelled in so much that, they take over all the superstars out there?
Exactly. Now, this is the point where everyone wants Giannis to mature quickly. They don't want him to mature in the next 2 or 3 years. We want him to mature now. There's a 7-game series, most probably against the Phoenix Suns, waiting for him. This is the finals. This is where legends are made. This is where boys become men. So this is the time for Giannis to mature. If he peaks at the right time, if his crew supports him, if his coaching staff steps up big time in the finals, and they somehow take over, the finals and win this ring this year, there's no doubt in my mind that Giannis is the best player in the league as of today. He surpassed all the tests. He played great basketball. He took all the bad things or all the criticism that was sent his way, and then he took it up, and then he got the job done. So Giannis will be tested huge, but I still believe he has the potential to pass all the tests.
Looking forward for, amazing games ahead in terms of the Clippers and the Suns, and yes, the Hawks versus the Bucks. Thank you so much, Abbas, for being part of the show and discussing the world of NBA with us.
Always a pleasure.
So that was obviously Abbas, his analogy with regards to how things are developing in the conference finals, obviously the Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals. But anyways, guys, we'll surely keep you updated because there are further more games coming up in terms of who reaches the final of the world of NBA. We are halfway down in terms of these conference finals. Anyways, guys, we'll take a quick break. Once we get back from the break, we'll discuss more from the world of sports. See you guys after the break. Yes, and welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of NBA, obviously the in-depth analysis of what's truly happening out there. But not to forget, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. For today, we have specifically made this special segment with regards to the Formula One. Talking about Formula One, obviously, we'll be talking about the Styrian Grand Prix that happened on Sunday. And not to forget that, Max Verstappen actually managed to win that. If he would have not had issues back then, I think this would have definitely been his 4th victory in a row, to be honest. But anyways, to discuss more in-depth analysis about the world of Grand Prix and F1, we have with us Chris, who's an expert with regards to this. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Chris, we'll start off with discussing what truly happened back in, this track to begin with, obviously, Styrian Grand Prix, and with regards to the lead that, Verstappen managed to get in terms of, the whole out there, because obviously Lewis Hamilton has issues with regards to how things did not truly develop his way. What's your complete take on this entire Grand Prix?
Yeah, it was probably the most dominant performance from Max Verstappen and Red Bull that we've seen ever in terms of this current era. We're kind of in an era that we call the hybrid era of Formula One. So since 2014, Mercedes has won every championship. Lewis Hamilton's won all but one of them, and Nico Rosberg won the other one.
Right.
But Red Bull are really giving them a run for their money this year. And the kind of way that Verstappen went about winning this race was clearly had the quicker car, got on pole position, could pull away comfortably from Hamilton, and Hamilton just had no response. Every other time they've raced each other, it's been pretty close. Whoever's been in the lead has had the main advantage, has normally held on to win, but they haven't had it easy. They've always had a lot of pressure on them, but there was no real pressure on Verstappen this time. The Red Bull was too quick in a straight line, and in Austria, the straights are very important. There was a lot of straights on that circuit at the Red Bull Ring, so it really played to Red Bull's strengths right now, and Verstappen was able just to walk away comfortably.
Right, and talking about, obviously, there was a point when it was super close with regards to the first position, and the second, obviously, it was not even more than 9 seconds. But eventually, it came to the conclusive side that, Verstappen managed to get that instant boost of getting hold of that. Because if you look at this scoring time, obviously, there's a 35-second gap in terms of the first and the second position. I think this surely is a big achievement in terms of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one in that sense, because Verstappen pulled out a gap of close to 5 seconds before the first round of pit stops, and that's quite a big gap in the kind of context of this season.
Right.
That meant he was comfortable, he wasn't really under threat. And then in the second stint, so after both drivers had changed their tyres, Hamilton wasn't able to get any closer to Verstappen, and he slowly pulled away, and as you say, got to about 9 or 10 seconds ahead.
Right.
At that point, Hamilton knew there was no chance of him winning. He wasn't going to catch Verstappen, he wasn't going to overtake him. So what they then focused on at Mercedes was an extra pit stop for new tyres right at the end of the race, so Hamilton could get an extra point for fastest lap. So he went and set the fastest lap on the final lap on fresh tyres. So that meant that he got the extra point that he wouldn't have had if he'd have just stayed in second as he was. So that slightly improves how his return was, but it meant he was further back in the final standings. So the extra pit stop cost him about 25 seconds. And as you say, the final result was half a minute. So it's a big gap on the road.
Absolutely. And if we look back into, obviously, when Pirelli tire failure, if we look back into Azerbaijan Grand Prix, if that had not happened, I think this would have been a more unstoppable victory for Max Verstappen.
Certainly. I mean, this would have been Verstappen's fourth in a row. As it is, it's his third in four. The one in Azerbaijan, Lewis could have ended up winning that race, but ended up having a problem himself and didn't score either. So Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen's teammate, won that race. So it's 4 in a row for Red Bull, but only 3 of those 4 have been Verstappen wins. So yeah, you could look at it one way, that Verstappen could have extended his lead by a further 10 points if he'd have held on to win in Azerbaijan, as he deserved to, but the tyre failed. But the flip side was, after that failure, Hamilton had a chance to win it too. A race restart very late on and had a brake problem. So if Hamilton had won that, he would have gained 25 points back and would right now still be leading the championship. So it's very fine margins. It's really, really close between the two. And it could be a bigger gap. Could be that Verstappen wasn't in the lead at all. So I think he'll be pretty happy. I think he's 18 points clear now, and that's a good position to be in.
Right. Now I'm looking at Max Verstappen obviously managed to do that. If I talk about, obviously, Lewis Hamilton, I would want to talk more about the upgrades that he was asking for to begin with, because there are some statements from him stating that obviously that car is definitely faster than mine. And, he asked Mercedes to give him those upgrades, and there have been a lot of questions. Obviously, the race engineer, Peter Bunton, also had the same inquiry with regards to that. But what exactly happened? Why did not he get those upgrades that he was asking for?
Yeah, so this is quite a strange year in Formula One. It should have been the first year of a new set of regulations, so brand new cars that were very different to the ones that we're currently seeing. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they got delayed by 12 months.
Right.
So these cars are fairly similar to last year's. There's a few changes.
Right.
And those changes that happened over the winter, Red Bull did a better job than Mercedes. And it means that Red Bull has a slightly quicker car. But everyone now is focusing on next year in these new regulations. There's a limit to how much money you can spend, so you've got to pick and choose where you develop. And if you upgrade the current car, as Red Bull are doing a little bit more, then you might make some lap time this year, but that might cost you next year when there's new regulations. So Mercedes are basically taking a bit of short-term pain, not really updating their car and bringing any upgrades this year. But next year, they hope that will pay off with a much stronger car, and they'll be back at the front. So they're still very competitive. They're still very close. This was the first weekend we'd really seen Red Bull have a clear advantage. I think that's what upset Hamilton. It's something he's not used to, but it's just one of those spells where I think in 12 months' time, they'll probably prefer the approach of not upgrading this car and having a stronger car next year. But it's tough at the moment for them.
Right, and would also want to ask about, obviously, with regards to, obviously, if we talk about Hamilton, I would want to talk more about, obviously, his recontracting with Mercedes-Benz. Obviously, he's been going into a phenomenal journey on his own. I think this was the 8th race of the 2021 Formula One season. But what How many seasons are there ahead, or how many races would be ahead in terms of deciding by the end of the year that who is going to be out there as the leading champion?
Well, I think this championship will still go pretty much down to the wire. We're trying to get 23 races in this year, so there's a long, long way to go. Right. And we're not even close to the halfway point. So I think it will be very much decided late in the season. We've got the final rounds at Jeddah and Abu Dhabi, where they're back-to-back at the moment. That could be where the season is decided and the championship is decided. It's partly because Hamilton has the experience, as you said. He's had such success with Mercedes, 7 world championships. He knows how to win titles, and he also knows how to stay in them. And he's actually had bigger deficits than he's got right now in the past. In pretty much every season that he's won the title, he's been further behind at some stage. So what Mercedes do need to worry about is the pace of Red Bull, but Hamilton is always there picking up the results. It was another second place. He limited how many points Verstappen pulled out over him on Sunday at Styria. So it will stay close, I think, for most of the season, and we're going to see this one decided in the final few races in November and December.
And I would also want you to shed more light on Lando Norris to begin with. Obviously, we talk about the McLaren team as well. Would you surely, because he ended up at the 5th position, I think there was a major upset with regards to, in between the race. So what exactly went wrong, and where exactly do they stand right now in terms of the championship?
I don't think a lot went wrong at all for McLaren. I think they had a really good weekend in terms of Norris, at least. Daniel Ricciardo had a tougher one that seems to be a bit of a struggle for him at the moment. He's not really picking up the results. Right. The power unit issue slowed him down during the race when he looked like he would have scored points, and he ended up 13th. But for Lando, it was a very, very impressive drive. He was really quick in qualifying, ended up starting 3rd because of a grid penalty for Valtteri Bottas. So he was right in the mix there. He was ahead of Sergio Perez in the other Red Bulls. So, I mean, the McLaren shouldn't be ahead of a Red Bull or a Mercedes, but the fact that he qualified it up there shows what he's capable of and how quick the car can be over one lap. But then when it came to a race distance, he just wasn't able to stick with them. So he did drop behind Perez and Bottas during the race quite comfortably early on. I think about lap 10 or 11, he lost those 2 positions and dropped to 5th. But he said yesterday after the race when we spoke to him that was a decision he kind of made not to fight too hard because those other cars were too quick. He needed to worry about the likes of Ferrari that were coming further behind, AlphaTauri, Alpine, Fernando Alonso, very strong. Right. So he needed to make sure he just kept them at bay. And he did comfortably in the end and held on for another 5th place, which I think is his 3rd in the row. He's had 2 podiums this year as well. He's been very, very strong and very consistent, which has been probably Norris's biggest strength. And that's really helping McLaren in a very close fight with Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship.
Right. I would also want to ask about, I think the next Grand Prix that's coming up our way, it would be the Austrian GP, if I'm not wrong.
Mm-hmm. So it is, yeah. Another race at the same circuit. We're staying at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, back-to-back races. It should have been that we were going to Canada originally in June. That got cancelled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then Turkey replaced it, but because of travel restrictions, they had to postpone that till later in the year. So to fill the gap, they added an extra race in Austria, which is how we started the season last year when everything was really, really difficult. We had 2 races in Austria, and they were both great. So history shows that we can have 2 exciting races, even though they're at the same circuit. There'll be slightly different tyres to try and mix things up a little bit, but I think we can probably expect to see something fairly similar with Red Bull, the favourites, and Max Verstappen, the one to beat.
Right. Well, thank you so very much, Chris, that you managed to give us all the in-depth analysis in terms of Formula One. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that, Chris, and obviously he discussed the world of F1, and yes, we would definitely have it in the same. The Austrian GP is next, which is going to be on the 4th of July. It's going to be on the same Red Bull Ring that currently is out there. So I think because of the COVID-19 restrictions, things have kind of shortened down with regards to changing venues, because when a team has to move from one place to another, obviously they have to go through the same quarantine perspective. So I think because of that, they have managed to keep it here. But anyways, this was in-depth analysis with regards to Formula One. I'll jump over to the world of tennis. Yes, in terms of tennis, as discussed, obviously, Djokovic chases another milestone at Wimbledon. Djokovic targets a record-equaling 20th major title. And world number 1 targets to ensure that he wins Wimbledon, which starts from Monday. And obviously, he has been on fire lately, managing to win all the major events right now. So let's hope that he manages to get that. The last memorable capture from Wimbledon was back in 2019 for him. He already has won a 9th Australian Open and the 2nd French Open. So I think so far so good. Everything is pretty much intact with regards to his performance. So we're surely looking forward to how he goes in the world of Wimbledon, because I think Wimbledon is one of the major events in terms of tennis. So we all are looking forward for his performance. Anyways, I'll quickly jump over to the in-depth analysis with regards to Euro 2020. Yes, Belgians obviously managed to beat Portugal 1-0 to enter the quarterfinals. Yes, the top 16 is currently is still underway. It's more like an elimination right now. So they've moved into the quarterfinals. We're looking forward to how things may formulate for them in the future. And defending champion Portugal were knocked out of the Euro 2020. I think there was a lot of struggle with regards to their performance in the second half. They had tried their level best in terms of scoring those goals, but obviously they could not manage. The possession was definitely at the end of the match with Portugal. I think they had a lot of shots on target, but I think if they were unlucky to manage to even, for instance, if they managed to level, obviously things would have changed. And at the 43rd minute, Torgan Hazard actually managed to score for the Belgians, which obviously gave them, the edge. Not to forget the Czechs also stunned the Dutch 2-0 to cruise into the quarterfinal. So I think things are slowly and gradually developing with regards to the quarterfinals, and we'll surely keep you updated with regards to that. And once the quarterfinals are sorted, we'll definitely have the semis and the finals. But anyways, guys, if you want to reach out to us, you can on our social media, which is @Indus News Sports. That works basically both for Twitter and for Instagram. Till then, take good care of yourselves and bye-bye.